Hello everyone, and welcome to my review for Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I'm your host, Colors Fade. Regular viewers of my channel know that I love turn-based games. However, the kind of turn-based games I favor are almost always tactical in nature. Games like XCOM, Battletech, Baldur's Gate 3, and Pathfinder, where movement, cover, and positioning are core parts of the combat experience. I love these kinds of games and I've been playing them for as long as I can remember, but I've never been a fan of JRPGs. And make no mistake, Clair Obscur is a JRPG, even though it's made by a French studio and doesn't utilize an anime art style. At its core, it's still a JRPG, or a JRPG, as people on social media have taken to calling it. And yet the story, art direction, music, and innovative combat were so different from every other JRPG I've ever seen that I decided to give it a try, and I'm glad I did. In a shattered world, a monolith stands in the distance with a foreboding number emblazoned on its surface. Every year, a mysterious being called the Paintress erases that number and paints a new one. This is the countdown, and when the prior number is erased, everyone of that same age dies. This is called the gommage, and much like Thanos' snap, it is emotionally devastating to everyone involved. This ritual has been going on for decades, and every year some of the people who find themselves staring at the last year of their lives head out on an expedition in an attempt to finally put an end to the Paintress. Not everyone wants to leave though. Some folk stay behind, figuring that since no expedition has ever succeeded, it's probably best to just enjoy what little time they have left. But for those who undertake the journey, they hope that if they fail, at least their efforts will ease the journey for those who come after, and that someday, one expedition will eventually succeed. And that's where our story begins, with the character of Gustave. Now I have to give massive credit to Sandfall's writers here, because this opening prologue is amazing. It's emotional and gut-wrenching and everything you want in a story setup. In fact, the whole game is a masterclass in narrative writing. I've complained many times in the past when the writing in video games has fallen short. So now it's time for praise, because this is some of the best writing I've encountered. The story, world building, characters, and dialogue are as good as it gets. All of the characters are beautifully written and expertly voiced. Sandfall Interactive managed to snag some of the most prominent voice actors in the business, including Andy Serkis, and they all deliver fantastic performances. It's worth noting, however, that this is not a true RPG, at least not in the way most folks think about role-playing games. This is a very linear story without any player agency or choices to make, and honestly, I was fine with that. Sometimes I think it benefits a game, especially one like this with amazing cutscenes, great writing, and top-shelf performances, to just tell a great story. Personally, I don't need every game to offer me a lot of choices, because so often those choices are either false or their impact is minimal. In this regard, Expedition 33 doesn't waste time trying to pretend to be something it's not. Instead, it cuts right to the heart of the matter and seeks to tell a very defined and emotionally moving story. And I think the game works perfectly fine this way. Where player choice does come into play is with the character builds. Each character has a unique set of mechanics that act as an extension of their personality on the battlefield. But while the character's specific mechanics are fixed, their builds are not. Thanks to various weapons, skills, and passive bonuses known as Pictos and Luminous, each character's combat capabilities can be altered in pretty significant ways. To start, weapons have unique abilities that unlock as they level up, and these abilities can shape the character's approach to combat and lend focus to particular playstyles. In addition, characters can equip up to 6 skills from their skill tree. These are active abilities that require action points to use, and they too can help shape a role a character plays in the party. But where they can really grow powerful is via a 2-tiered passive ability system referred to as Pictos and Lumina. A character can equip 3 Pictos at a time, and these passives provide 2 bonuses. First, they grant stat bonuses, which by themselves are nice, but not necessarily the most important part. What's more useful are the passive abilities they provide, which over time, when stacked, can significantly enhance a character's combat prowess. Only one player can equip a specific Pictos at a time. What's really interesting is that after that character wins 4 battles with that Pictos, as denoted by the golden edges around the icon, it is then considered mastered, at which point it can now be equipped as a Luminous instead by every other member of the team. As a Luminous, it no longer grants its unique stat bonus like hit points, but that's not a big deal because the important part is the passive ability. The more Luminous points a character has, the more passives they can equip. And this is where you can really turn these characters into powerhouses, depending on how you construct their Luminous loadout. Equipping a Luminous costs a certain amount of points against a character's personal cap. This cap automatically increases as they level, and additional increases can also be gained by spending one of the game's currencies. That said, the cap never grows so fast that you can equip every passive you find, because the game has a lot of them. You'll always have to make hard choices about what Luminous to equip and which to leave inactive. Overall, I love this system. My only gripe, and a gripe that others have expressed as well, is that we kind of desperately need loadouts. There are times when it is desirable to change a character's build for a specific zone or boss mob, but given the number of Luminous involved as well as the 6 skills and various weapon choices, this becomes burdensome to do. My hope is that with a future patch, we'll see characters get loadouts. I think having at least one alternate loadout would be great. At its core, the combat is your classic turn-based system where characters spend action points to fire off various skills. But where Expedition 33 sets itself apart is with its real-time elements. On offense, it utilizes quick-time events to help boost each skill's power or increase the number of targets that a buff affects. But where it gets really challenging is on defense, where players must dodge and parry enemy attacks with absolute real-time precision. On normal difficulty, Expeditioner difficulty they call it, the dodge and parry windows are very, very narrow. So narrow, in fact, that some players are now going back to give Sekiro another try and finding success doing so. The advantage to parrying is that if you can manage to parry every attack during an enemy's turn, you can retaliate with a powerful counterattack. But it can actually be incredibly challenging to diagnose many of the enemy attacks. In some cases, audio cues are actually more useful than the visual ones, especially when the camera is moving around and companions are performing various flourishes. In other cases, it's difficult to diagnose an attack no matter what you're trying to key on. I got about 2/3 of the way through the game before I finally decided to knock the difficulty down to story mode for a while. Unfortunately, enemy damage output is severely nerfed in this mode, which made it feel almost like cheating. So eventually I had to bump it back up. For me personally, I wish the game had a difficulty mode between story and Expeditioner. I'd love a mode that retained all the hit points and damage output of the Expeditioner mode, but with the dodge and parry windows of story mode. To me, that would be the sweet spot. Outside of the difficulty with the dodge and parry timings, the combat possesses a satisfying level of complexity. Each character has their own unique way of altering their damage output and accumulating action points, and the Pictos and Luminous system provides a lot of flexibility when it comes to build customization. The other part of the game that shines is enemy variety. About the time you start to feel comfortable parrying enemy attacks and the combat starts to feel a little repetitive, they throw new enemy types at you, forcing you to learn a whole new set of attacks and parry timings. Honestly, the variety of enemies in this game is pretty stunning and keeps the combat fresh throughout the whole game. Clair Obscur is loaded with some of the most stunning area designs I've ever seen. But it's not just the areas that are breathtaking. Everything, from character models to enemies to battle animations, is top-notch work. The amount of detail and care that's been put into this game's art direction rivals anything I've ever seen from big AAA studios with bigger budgets and a lot more employees. To think that this game was made by a studio of around 30 people boggles the mind. My only gripe is the bobbleheads. In the past few months, both this game now and Dragon Age Veilguard have released with character heads that are a touch too big. I don't understand why this is suddenly becoming a trend, but I hope it comes to an end soon. As far as the audio side of the game goes, it's just as good as the visual side. Well, almost. I do have one tiny complaint. I found the footsteps of my characters inappropriately squishy and annoying. Morticimal Gaming was the first person to point this out in his review, and I found myself bothered by it as well. Fortunately, one of the characters glides when they sprint, so no footsteps sound while she's leading the party. But it's a strange lapse in quality when literally every other sound effect in the game is so well done. Then there's the soundtrack. It's a completely unique work of art and a core part of the game. I suspect some of the songs will stick with players long after they're done playing. But what's even more amazing is the story of how this came to be. Composer Lauren Testar was, like a lot of other aspiring artists, uploading his music to SoundCloud and receiving very little attention for it. Then, after submitting a piece of his work to an indie game forum, the director at Sandfall Interactive heard his music and reached out to see if he'd be interested in composing the soundtrack for Clair Obscur. The rest, as they say, is history. It's not every day that a completely unknown composer gets a shot to create the soundtrack for a new game, and then to go on and compose such an amazing soundtrack defies all expectations. But that's kind of the running theme with Clair Obscur. It's the result of a small team of very passionate developers and artists building something that they truly believe in, and being allowed to build it in the first place. My only real issue with Clair Obscur is that at its core, it's still a JRPG. And JRPGs have a tendency to try and do a little too much, to the point where they end up with game systems that feel completely out of place. For instance, there are locations in this game that exist for no other reason than to provide a single piece of meaningless loot. In this case, a record that can play a song on a phonograph back at camp. What's especially weird is that these areas are the only areas in the game where you can't rotate the camera or have it follow the party leader. Instead, it's a static scene where you need to awkwardly navigate your character over to a shiny piece of loot, grab it, and then leave. There's literally nothing else to do in these locations, which begs the question, why even have them? Why not just place this piece of loot on the overworld map like they do with so many other pieces of loot, or inside one of the game's adventuring zones? It's such a weird design choice that feels like it belongs in a completely different game, and I fault the fact that it's a JRPG for the reason why it even exists. And then there are minigames, all of which feel awkward. The same goes for platforming, which is abysmal. The movement animations in Clair Obscur don't lend well to platforming, so it defies logic as to why this even exists in the game. Fortunately, the platforming sections are mostly optional, but again, it feels like a mechanic that belongs in a different game, so I question why it's included in the first place. And then there are the minigames, all of which feel really awkward and out of place in this particular game with this particular story. Had the developers of Clair Obscur not insisted on making this a tried and true JRPG, I think a lot of this fat could have been trimmed, and I think the game would have been better for it. Expedition 33 is a magnificent achievement no matter what my petty gripes with it are. It's a stunning game, really. What's even more impressive is realizing that a very small team of developers made it, and for a lot of them this was their first major project. Which goes to show what's possible when you allow passionate people a chance to build something they love. In a way, Clair Obscur reminds me a lot of Baldur's Gate 3. Not only is it a great game, but it's also not trying to take advantage of its customers. There's no season pass. There's no microtransactions, no battle passes or loot crates, no garbage. Just a great video game made with a reasonable price point. Sandfall Interactive isn't looking to nickel and dime its players to death. Instead, they just made an amazing game with gorgeous graphics, a stellar soundtrack, great writing, wonderful voice acting, and really fun gameplay. This seems like a simple formula for success, doesn't it? And yet we see AAA studios get it wrong time after time. Sandfall Interactive, though, much like Larian, understands the assignment. They set out to make a great single-player game and they did it. I can only hope this is yet another nail in the coffin for the arrogant AAA publishers and their live service slop. Stop trying to monetize every damn pixel on the screen, you fools. Just go out and make a great game, because I guarantee if you do, the players will respond. We play games because we love them, so make games that we can love. It's really that simple. Anyway, that's my rant. I think Expedition 33 is an amazing game, and I'm glad I took a chance on it. I really do think it's worthy of Game of the Year, and at this point in time, I think it's probably going to win it. Granted, there's still a lot of the year left to go, but I'm having a hard time imagining how anything beats this. If you're on the fence about this game, I'd encourage you to take the plunge. For the price point, I just don't think you can go wrong. I'm Colors Fade, and if you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. I look forward to reading your questions and comments down below, and until next time, happy gaming, everyone.